Welcome to The Jury's Still Out, a show highlighting and discussing all things having to do with law, trials, and juries. Your host is Mary Griffiths, a litigation consulting expert who has overseen thousands of cases in state and federal courts, and is a jury correspondent to discuss trial matters and media strategy as it pertains to jury selection and courtroom performance. This is The Jury's Still Out.
Hi, welcome back to The Jury's Still Out. I'm your host, Mary Griffiths, where we talk about all things law, trials, and juries. I'm very excited to talk to my next guest, who has been a judge for 14 years in the District Court of Collin County, 296. Please welcome to the show, Judge John Roach Jr.
Well, thank you for having me, Mary. I appreciate it very much.
Do you mind if I call you John?
Not at all.
Oh, well, perfect. So you have had the privilege, and this is fantastic news for a lot of trial lawyers, you had the first in-person jury selection in Collin County since the pandemic started.
That's right. We did that last week.
So, I mean, my first question out of the box is, how did it feel to see actual jurors back in the courtroom?
It was good to see people, period, in the courtroom. We've been on Zoom for so long, and so it was just great to see people, lawyers, bailiffs, or whoever it was.
Right.
But it was different. I will tell you what, it was very, very different than the way we did things before.
Well, and so let's talk about this. So safety protocols are going to be extremely important during this time. What type of safety protocols do you have now in your courtroom?
Well, what we do countywide is we have wipes everywhere, hand sanitizers everywhere, disinfectants everywhere. And so every time we use a chair, a table, or whatever it is, our staffs come in behind it and clean all that up. But with regard to juries, though, you know, they have a perception of how jury trials were pre-COVID, which was very tight quarters. And so we immediately, even when we send out the summons to appear in court, we tell them all the safety protocols that we've already done and what they can expect while we're there. But for example, I don't pick juries in my courtroom anymore. I pick them in the central jury room, which was much, much, much bigger. And so just that alone changes the whole aspects of jury selection.
So did you have a pretty high attendance for this first person jury selection?
We were very, very surprised about the response. We probably summoned 130 people to that first one, and we got 83 showed up.
Fantastic.
So I thought that was fantastic. Even on a normal day, I think that's a pretty good deal. Post-COVID was a little surprising, actually.
Right. So let's talk about that for the jurors' perspective, the parties and the lawyers. So in your courtroom now, you have plexiglass, right?
We do.
Is it just for the judge, for the witness? What is the plexiglass?
It is as many places as we can. I always tell people it looks like a hockey rink. Because it looks like, and I'm in the penalty box, by the way. Right. So I have plexiglass on my bench all the way around me on three sides. My court reporter has it around her. The witness stand has it around the witness stand. And the bailiff has it around him. And then we have plexiglass around the entire jury box, but we're not using the jury box anymore, and I can explain that to you in a minute. And then we have plexiglass between the counsel tables. And then we have plexiglass between the courtroom, the inner courtroom, and the audience seat. And so it is plastic from
You were
head
plexiglassed out.
We were plexiglassed out.
So for the jurors, for spreading out, so you had them in the main room, and they were socially distanced, I take it?
Correct.
Spread out.
And so, for example, when we had it before, and on a Monday morning, you'd have 500, 600 people show up in one room.
Right.
And then we would say, okay, you 60 go to this courtroom, you 70 go to this courtroom, this 40 go to this courtroom.
Right.
Well, now we can only fit 100 people in that jury room, and so we can, in essence, pick one jury a day. And that's it. And so that is our courtroom for the moment. And so they are socially distanced. They're 6 feet apart. Everybody wears masks. And the lawyers are kind of confined back around the counsel table and can't walk up to people and break that 6-foot barrier.
Well, okay, so let's talk about that, because I know many lawyers, I mean, when I'm talking to my clients and stuff, they're like, okay, so what is this going to look like for jury selection? First of all, the biggest question is for sound for lawyers. They're wondering, do I have to wear a mask? Do I wear a face shield? How are people going to be able to hear me?
Well, that's very difficult with the masks. And so we've done it both ways, to tell you the truth. We've had lawyers wear masks, but they have to wear the right type of mask. What we're noticing is if you wear a fabric mask, it's almost impossible to hear you.
Right.
The surgical masks, the lighter masks are much, much better. And then no mask at all is is the ideal, but you really mess people up.
Right.
We had a prosecutor on the first jury trial we picked last week. He took his mask off to address them, and he was probably within 8 feet of the person in front of him. And that person had a very, very difficult time, had basically an anxiety attack, and had to excuse herself from the voir dire panel. And you feel sorry for him, for everybody. So that was a problem.
Yeah.
And so those things we just didn't anticipate, but and we're trying to work those things out.
So, I mean, this just sounds like just a simple kind of issue, but is the microphones for the lawyers, is it going to be on the lapel? I mean, I've heard some lawyers saying, you know, I'd like to attach it to my mask so I can be heard.
We've done it both ways.
Okay.
And so we've done the hand mic, or just a handheld mic, and you can get up and use that. And then this morning I picked one, and we did the lapel mics for the lawyers, and that seemed to work okay through the lighter masks. I believe if they were wearing a cloth mask, that you could not have heard them with a lapel mic and a fabric mask.
So a fabric mask, wearing the lapel mic. Now tell me about how is it going to work? Because I mean, I know I'm a roamer in the courtroom. Like I like to get up and move. Are lawyers going to be stuck behind the podium for voir dire purposes,
I
for
believe
example?
that I don't know about other counties. All I can talk about is Collin County. We have some space for the lawyers to walk around. I'm a walker too.
Right.
And we have some space to do that, but they really have to be careful about that distance, because you're going to throw people off right off the bat. People will be watching your spacing more than listening to your words, and that's a concern.
Right. Now, did you get a sense of the jurors who came back? Like October 5th, I think that was your jury selection. Did you get a vibe or a sense that they felt comfortable being back in the courtroom?
Well, I asked them. I'll tell you right off the bat, I do all disqualifications and exemptions, and I do all that kind of stuff. And then one of the questions I ask, and I'm fearful of doing it, because all you really have to say is, I feel uncomfortable, and we're going to have to excuse you. And so I asked, ladies and gentlemen, do you feel comfortable where you are? Does anybody feel unsafe? And then if they do, we frankly excuse that juror, because I don't think they're ever going to feel safe. And so I think that distracts them away from their job as a juror.
Right.
And so I would say the majority of people out of that 82 that showed up, about 4 asked to be excused just because they didn't want to be a room full of people.
Okay.
And so I didn't think that was very bad.
Right.
I was a little surprised.
Right.
But it also had to do, and I had to explain this to the jurors, and I think it's really important, is that I did a child sexual assault case. And so it was a really serious case. And I explained to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I says, ladies and gentlemen, we have to balance your safety and the safety of our employees with a defendant's right for a speedy trial.
Right.
And so this is the best balance that we can do. We can't wait to try folks, at least in a criminal context, for a year waiting on a vaccine, because these people need to go to trial, and the victim needs to have their case heard.
Right.
And so once I told them that, I think they felt that civic responsibility to be there and really believed that we were taking all the precautions that we could to make them feel safe.
So how would you feel, or what's your thought process on, should we do more like, I call it the COVID questionnaire, maybe doing a hardship questionnaire, getting people to talk about that in the beginning so that when they come down for jury selection, we have an idea, so we don't necessarily taint the pool with, oh, I'm scared of COVID, and then half your pool is gone.
Well, I think we could do that. I think we could do that. I think those people who are that fearful of COVID just don't show up.
Right.
I think they just don't flat show up. So that questionnaire, they're not even showing up with their questionnaire.
Right.
And so I think the questions right off the bat to the beginning of the jury is, who has a COVID problem? I thought it would be contagious.
Right.
Not the COVID, but the excuse.
Right.
The excuse would be contagious, and people would go, "Oh, if that's all it takes to get out of jury service, sign me up."
Right.
But I really haven't noticed that at all. Not at all. 3 or 4 people, but out of 100, 4%, I think we can live with that.
Well, and so how do you think the deliberations are going to look?
Okay, well, we do things all completely different now.
Right.
So, for example, we pick our jurors in that Grand Central jury room, and then we go to the courtroom, okay, which is much smaller than that room, and the audience seats become the jury box. And so that we don't have anybody sitting in the jury box. Actually becomes the audience seats if someone wants to watch it.
Gotcha.
And so we socially distance those jurors in the spectators' seats, and that becomes the jury box.
So the lawyers are gone, and then the gallery is where they're deliberating.
That's where they hear the evidence.
That's where they hear the evidence. They hear everything.
And they deliberate all in the room. And so the lawyers and the judge leave, and that's their room. And then we come in when we're needed and stuff. And so that's a lot of space for them.
Right.
And that's the best we could. One of the other options that we're using is to use another courtroom next door for jury deliberations.
Right.
And so this is our active courtroom where we tried the case, but your jury room is going to be in this big courtroom next door. The problem with that is if you took taking a courtroom out.
I was going to
Out of
say,
the, so yeah.
are we then just kind of backstacking all of our cases because we're looking for space now when we're trying cases?
Space is a big issue.
Right.
The flip side of that is that when you're doing your Zoom hearings on non-jury cases, you don't need the space.
Correct.
And so we're trying to find that right balance of space for jury trials that takes a lot more space, but we're saving space because of the Zoom hearings that we have.
Well, and I mean, you bring up a great topic, and this is something I know that my firm is doing, is that we are helping lawyers with their virtual trial presentations.
Yes.
And to quote some spaghetti westerns, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to these Zoom presentations.
No doubt.
So what traps are you seeing for lawyers when they're doing their Zoom presentations?
I don't know what it is exactly, but for some reason, it's almost like they don't believe, if you're not talking, you're not being looked at. And so I think, because I see everybody. I do the gallery view on my Zoom, and I can see everybody. But people are doing funny stuff. I mean, they're in the kitchen filling up their cup with ice, and they're flipping their phone upside down, and I'm looking at their ceiling fan. I had a hearing the other day where someone did that, and the cat's up there looking at the phone, and so I can see this cat in the box. And I think that's embarrassing to some degree to the court, to your client watching you on there, not really paying attention, or they don't believe you're paying attention.
Right.
And I just think it sets the wrong tone for a hearing or a lawyer who's getting paid a lot of money to be there.
Well, and clearly the cat had an opinion, obviously, because the cat wanted to come in for the Zoom
Very
hearing.
curious cat.
Very curious cat. So I guess is the takeaway, we need to be looking through the camera. That's my big thing, is look through the camera and see what the visual looks like, see what your background looks like, see what you are looking like.
You have to. Yeah. You have to. You know, everybody knows that a trial is presentation based.
Right.
And so that is now your presentation space, and it's a two-dimensional space, and that's all you have.
Right.
To convey your message, whatever that is. I think the best look that I see from lawyers is, what I'd recommend to a law firm is to have a designated space for Zoom hearings, a quiet space out of the way where people aren't walking by the window in your law firm or in your house, a designated space, and have a backdrop with your firm name in the back. And I've seen that, and that's, to me, seems the most professional presentation over Zoom, is when you have that, and then pay attention. Pay attention to your body movements and things like that. If you're paying attention, you can see the judge if you're rolling your eyes or something.
Right.
I had a lawyer get really mad at a decision that I made, and he threw something across his bedroom.
Oh, man.
And I was thinking, well, how do I hold this guy in virtual contempt for acting a fool? Because I would never stand for that in my courtroom.
Right.
And so why would I stand for that in the presence of the court by video? And so I think we're losing some of our manners and our presentation styles and the understanding that the court can really see you.
Well, and that's a great point, because like I know from a witness's standpoint, when we're, helping prep witnesses, there's something about when you're in your chair, in your bedroom, I think the lack of formality may even not just impact your presentation, but substantively, you may be thinking, I'm so comfortable that when you're being cross-examined or just being deposed, that may impact your credibility.
I absolutely think it absolutely affects your credibility if you do not understand what that message is you're sending by your lackadaisicalness, or you're sitting in your bedroom.
Right.
I mean, if you're sitting on your bed doing your deposition, and that may be the safest place in your house or quiet place in your house you can do, but it just sends a bad message. I do criminal, civil, family law, and CPS cases. I've had defendants smoking cigarettes with their sunglasses and their ball cap on while they're pleading to a felony case out in the yard.
Out in the yard.
Yeah, out in the yard. And so you're like, you can't do that. You're in felony court.
Right.
And I think that's really the duty and responsibility of the lawyers to create that formality that we have to live with over Zoom.
Right.
And I think that's really important for us to do.
Right. And then, we had talked earlier about like the YouTube aspect of this. So are any of your hearings, are you posting them on YouTube?
We are not anymore.
Okay.
There was a time probably in March, April, May, June that we were posting most of them on YouTube to comply with the open courts provision of the Texas Constitution.
Right.
But lots of problems with that. For example, I do CPS cases. That's some pretty personal things about people's kids and alleged abuse and things like that. And so you have to be really mindful of what you're putting out there in the atmosphere or on the web that never goes away. It never goes away. And so we've backed off of that now, and a lot of it has to do with the courtrooms are now open.
Right.
And so that complies with the open court requirement. So that's helping. But we've tried to balance that too, and it's hard.
Yeah. I can only imagine because, as you said, that would continue on and on. So how do we know? Or even a lawyer friend of mine brought this up, and it was, if we have a YouTube link, how do we know that somebody isn't taping the hearing and then maybe distributing it depending on what sort of information that they're
Absolutely
hearing?
right.
We just don't know.
We don't know it. And I caution people, this is not to be recorded. This is a court order not to be recorded. I have no idea.
Right.
And I don't know where it's going. I don't know how long it's going to sit in a drawer till it pops its head up, and or who recorded it. Frankly, at the end of the day, I want to punish somebody for it or find out who did it. You really have no idea who recorded it.
Right. So have you seen, because I mean, Zoom, let's face it, there was a lot of leeway given to us all come March when we were all hopping on Zoom and going, is this thing on? Am I on camera? What's happening here? Have you seen any sort of generational differences between lawyers and presenting? Who's doing sort of better in their presentation process?
Well, I may be a little offended by that question because I'm probably a more old school type, and so I had a difficult time with it.
You were the one going, is this thing on?
Yeah, this thing on. Hey, you're muted. How do I unmute? I have no idea how you unmute.
Right.
And stuff. I think the millennials have us down pat. And they're just used to that virtual world. I mean, they learn stuff. They've been watching YouTube for years as entertainment, as educational. Some of their assignments were done on a computer. In my generation, they weren't. And so I think they certainly have the advantage of the presentation on Zoom, whether that's how you pop up a document for presentation before the court or whatever it is. They just seemed a lot more natural at it than we do.
And I was going to say, so that would be a big impact. So lawyers, if you're going to do your virtual trial presentation, you need to either know it yourself so that you can pop up those documents, or if you just feel like that's not your jam, that's not your thing, get somebody else on board who can help you do that.
Absolutely. I really, truly believe preparing for a Zoom trial or a Zoom hearing is much more difficult and takes much more preparation than it does in real life.
Wow.
Because the timing has to be right.
Right.
About, hey, I'm going to refer you to Exhibit 3, page 7. Well, you need to know that quickly to pull that up instead of going, hey, hang on just a second, Judge, where I can't find the exhibit. Now, here, this is the first page. Let me flip over here to the seventh page. You lose the momentum. Of your presentation or your cross-examination, which is even harder to do on Zoom.
Right. Well, have you seen a lot of cross-examinations on Zoom?
I have.
I was going to say, so what's the takeaway on that as far as how effective are they?
It's not as effective as in live. You get in a cross-examination and you just get in a rhythm and you just get it and you cut off the witness a little bit to interrupt them so you can guide them in your cross-examination. You can't do that in Zoom because the judge will go, hey, listen, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Oh, did you have an objection? Don't talk over each other. And so that rhythm that you remember in the old way of doing things in live courtroom is not there in Zoom. So it's hard. It can be done, but I don't think it's nearly as effective.
Because there is a magic to being in the courtroom. That's its own animal of how we evaluate people, how we hear the story of the case. It's not the same virtually.
It goes all the way back to the back. For example, I think when people show up to the courtroom, I think you're more likely to settle. Because just beyond those doors is the person who's about to make that decision. I don't think you feel that way when you're sitting in your living room.
Right.
And so I think a lot of settlements that could be made aren't made because everybody's separated in Zoom. They only come together for the very first time in front of the judge, where at the courthouse, you're in the hallway.
Right.
And you're talking about those things. And so it starts from there, and then the formalities missing and the gravity of the situation and the decisions that are about to be made, I think are lost in the virtual world.
Well, and I've even heard some judges say that, they've been asked technology questions, during hearings, like, Your Honor, can you flip that exhibit up for me?
Yep.
I mean, where would this ever have occurred in a real courtroom?
It wouldn't have.
And so
we're all trying to adapt, and we are doing the best we can. I truly believe, and I've been honored to be with these lawyers as we try this whole new way of doing things.
Right.
And I'm proud of all the judges who've made those changes. But we'll see how it turns out.
Right.
But justice is being done. We get hear a lot that the courthouses have been closed since March. That is flat, not true.
Right.
And so we've been working. We just ended up working in a different way.
Well, and let me piggyback on that. So how did your day-to-day change? Like come March and now we're in October of 2020. How did your day shift change?
Well, mine went to a computer.
Yes.
And so I'm one of those people that have to work in the office because I believe the formality of the the judicial system. So my dog barking doesn't help that. So
Right.
the Amazon guy delivering my package,
Right.
ringing the doorbell in the middle of my serious hearing on whatever it is. And so I went to the office every single day, sat in my bench in a very empty courtroom with plexiglass everywhere for no reason, and sat on a computer.
Okay.
And I would try 17, 18 hearings a day on a computer. But so that changed. But a lot of my colleagues who are millennials,
Right.
who do everything from home, and they felt very comfortable about doing that. And so it's changed a little bit for me,
Right.
but not really
Right.
on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and what sort of, if jurors are receiving their jury summons now within the next few months, what would you be telling them to kind of ease their mind and also inform them about coming down into the courthouse?
The first thing is that their safety is paramount important to us. It just really is. This is not a flippant decision. This is not, hey, let's just get things going, or COVID doesn't exist. That is not the message we're trying to send at all. And that we have spent months and months and months preparing for the days that we started jury trials back. And so I believe that we've done every single thing we possibly can to be as safe as we can. So that's really the message I want to send to people is that we're doing the best we can, and we have to balance those interests of getting those cases tried.
Right.
And I don't think people who are in a family law struggle, who want a divorce, and who kids think don't need to be visiting mom or dad because of drug use or alcohol use, they need that venue to resolve that dispute, and sometimes by a jury trial. And we can't shut that down waiting on a vaccine, because businesses need us, families need us,
Right.
criminal defendants need to be tried, those victims need to have their case heard, and stuff. And so we don't do this lightly. And so I hope people realize that. It's really important to us.
Right, and the wheels of justice have to
They
continue.
have to keep going.
And so one of the things that you do and you're actively involved in is the North Texas Veterans Court.
That's right.
What exactly does that entail?
Okay. And so what we realized is that veterans are coming back from war who have issues, okay? And we call them invisible wounds. And that is from post-traumatic stress syndrome, from traumatic brain injury, hyperanxiety and stuff because of their service in the military, either overseas, at war and conflict. And they come over here and you hear the stories that they're a little different. And they really are. But a lot of them settle in and start back to where they were, but a lot of them don't. And so instead of asking for help, because that's not the macho thing to do, or that's not the rugged thing to do, they start self-medicating and stuff. And so we find them on drugs and alcohol, or they have anger problems at home, have a car pull off on the side of the road and have a road rage deal, and they have a problem.
Right.
And they end up in the criminal justice system. What a judge figured out about 15 years ago in New York is that the criminal justice system that we have today is not equipped to handle those veterans and to meet their needs. If we just let them go through the regular system and not get help for those very specific things, they're going to reoffend. And so we have some heroes who could have gotten the help that they deserve, but they're in the penitentiary if we don't do something. And so the Veterans Court is a very intensive probation court, and they're supervised by the court. We have a representative from the VA. We have case managers, a program manager, a clinical psychologist on staff and stuff. And so as these veterans enter our court system, we come up with a customized treatment plan just for them to get them individual counseling and patient treatment and different types of counseling. We address their housing needs, their employment needs, their transportation needs, and we kind of do a holistic approach to the veteran and give them all the tools that they need to be successful, with the goal of never seeing them again in the court system.
Right.
And it's a very intensive program. At first I thought it was hug a veteran program. We're just going to hug it out and see how it goes. That's not it at all. It is very, very, very hard to get through. But if they do, they come out a whole different person.
I was going to say, it sounds like it's multiple layers, and it's the holistic 360 approach.
It is.
So that you never see them again in court for the wrong reason.
And that's the goal.
Right.
And that's the goal. And so I do that in Collin County, Kaufman County, Fannin County, Rockwall County, and Grayson County. And so every Friday, except for today, I travel around to those different counties and preside over their veterans courts because I think it's important.
And this has still been going on since the pandemic,
It
right?
has, but we did it by Zoom.
Did it by
So we had to do it by Zoom too, because that's a lot of people in the courtroom at one time. Because when we have a veterans court, every veteran in the court comes at the same time.
Okay.
And so it's not the one-on-one thing. It is just like we did in the military, is that we are all a group of brothers and sisters in the military.
Right.
So, but that we can't do that during COVID.
Right. So one of my last questions to you,
Sure.
You did an adoption. What's been sort of one of those best cases that's been coming out during the pandemic that was sort of like a heartwarming case for you?
Oh, I had quite a few, and adoptions are the best. The adoptions are the best because mainly they are the result of a CPS case.
Right.
And so we have a kid removed from their home because it's unsafe for them, and mom and dad are on drugs or whatever, and so they're just not equipped or appropriate to raise kids. And so they're in the foster care system. And we see them struggle through it, and sometimes they feel abandoned, and then there's a lot of issues going on with these kids.
Right.
If they haven't been abused too, that's just another layer. And so to see those kids just progress through the system and find a forever family, we call them, to be adopted is wonderful. And so those are really my heartwarming deals. But you know what's cool about Zoom that has been great? When I do these adoptions, they can invite anybody around the world to be at the adoption because we're on Zoom.
Right.
And so it has been really cool. I've had 70, 80 people log into a Zoom adoption to watch this wonderful, magical experience happen via Zoom. And so that has given people access to something really, really cool that's been just wonderful to watch.
A great virtual sort of hearing. That's fantastic. Well, John, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. All of this is good information as we try to get back lawyers and jurors, everyone get back into the courtroom. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you want to hear anything more about our guest today, please look at the links. And of course, you can always subscribe to our YouTube, The Jury's Still Out, or Instagram and Facebook pages. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for watching The Jury's Still Out. To learn more about Mary Griffiths or our guests today, check the description below. Don't forget, we'll be here every other week of the month with more incredible trial stories.